In this tutorial, we explore completing an AcroForm using the DynamicPDF's Cloud API PDF endpoint. DynamicPDF Cloud API is an easy-to-use and scalable API for creating PDF documents using the DynamicPDF Cloud API. Using the DynamicPDF Cloud API, you can create a PDF using DynamicPDF Designer online, convert images to PDFs, merge PDFs, create new PDFs from scratch, extract metadata from existing PDFs and images, encrypt PDFs, add barcodes, and much, much more. And best of all, these tasks are all accomplished using one of the DynamicPDF Cloud API REST endpoints, meaning there's no software for you to install. Currently, we offer the following REST endpoints: DLEX layout, image info, PDF info, PDF text, PDF XMP, and PDF. The instructions document we're going to download to our local file system. We leave the AcroForm in cloud storage. Use the Resource Manager to manipulate your resources in your cloud storage space on DynamicPDF Cloud API. In general, resources that are static, they don't change a lot, should remain on the cloud. Resources that change quite a bit, for example, data, or resources that are specific to your particular clients or might be security sensitive, you should leave those in your local file system. All accounts come with storage space. If for the free account, you have 10 megabytes. For the basic account, 100 megabytes. The Pro plan has 250 megabytes, and the Premium has unlimited storage. So now let's describe how we're going to use the PDF endpoint and the processing that's going to occur. We're going to call the PDF endpoint using the instructions document that we have locally. It's going to then get the AcroForm, process it, fill in the form fields, which it's going to get from the instructions, create a new PDF, and then return that PDF as a response. And here you have the tutorial for completing an AcroForm. Let's go ahead and scroll down to the required resources. And as you can see, we have two required resources. We have the instructions JSON, and we have the PDF containing the form fields that we're going to complete. Now the PDF form we're going to leave in the cloud, and we're going to download the instructions JSON to our local file system. To get these resources, we need to go to the Resource Manager, and then go up to the Samples folder, and add the samples for this tutorial. Okay, let's go ahead and log in so that we can get our resources from the Samples folder. Manage Resources, Samples, and select Add Samples, and then select Samples, fill in AcroForm. There we go, it added them. Now the PDF endpoint uses an instructions JSON document that you send to that endpoint. The endpoint then processes the instructions to create the resultant PDF. This makes the PDF endpoint a little more complex than the other Cloud API endpoints because we have to use an instructions document. If you call the PDF endpoint directly, you must create that instructions document and pass it to it. That's why we downloaded the instructions document so that we can demonstrate that. But when you use one of the DynamicPDF client libraries, you're no longer required to create an instructions document. The client library actually hides the complexity of creating the instructions document from you. So that makes the client libraries much easier to use. Let's pause to review the instructions document. The instructions document is very important if you're using the PDF endpoint. So let's go ahead and go here, and instead of tutorials, we're going to User's Guide and Cloud API User's Guide, Instruction Schema, and the JSON Instruction Schema. The JSON Schema, you can access the JSON Schema here, and there is the schema of what an instructions document looks like. If you wanted to, you could use this yourself to create valid JSON documents and instructions documents, but it's much easier to just do it through the client library. Okay, let's look at the schema or the diagram here real quick. So every document begins with a PDF document element, and then it has an outlines array, templates array, and it has things like author, title, subject, creator. Those are on the top level. But by and large, the most important aspect of the schema is the inputs array. So every instructions document must have an inputs array. And it can have multiple inputs. An input can be a page. And in this case, you would create a new PDF documents from some instructions to create a page. DLEX, in this case, you would have a resource that is a DLEX resource, and you would use that to create the PDF. PDF, now for this particular input type, you're just specifying a pre-existing PDF. So say I had 3 PDFs I wanted to merge, I would specify 3 PDFs in the inputs array. And image, so we can change images to PDFs. And okay, so those are the input types. Scroll down again to the bottom of the schema, and notice down at the bottom there's a form fields array. This is the array we're going to use to complete our PDF form. And as you can see, each element is a name value pair, and then you can flatten it and you can remove it. And here's our tutorial's instructions JSON. Notice on the top level we have the reference to the schema, the author, and the title. Then we have our inputs. In this case, it's one input, a PDF. And here's the form fields array. And here's the PDF that we're going to eventually fill out, correlated to the JSON fields, the form fields. Now let's look at the curl example. We're going to use curl to make the call directly to the PDF REST endpoint. For convenience, I already added the curl command to Notepad. So we have curl, and it's a post command. Curl, post. There's the endpoint to the PDF endpoint, our authorization key, and don't forget bearer. We need to fill out the API key, our instructions document, the local path to our instructions document, that is, and the output. Okay, let's replace the API key. Go to the Environment Manager, Apps and API Keys, copy, and it's copied, so let's go ahead and go back. And let's paste our API key. And remember, you have to have the word bearer there. That's part of the value. Okay, everything looks good. So let's copy and paste it and run it in the command prompt. Okay, run it. Open it, and there was an error. Now remember, curl takes whatever the output is and writes it to the file that's specified, regardless of the file type. We specified it's going to output it to a PDF, so let's open that in TextPad. Okay, let's see. Oh yeah, of course. We put in just the file name rather than the relative path in cloud storage. Let's go ahead and go to Managed Resources, and let's go find our file. Right-click, and copy file path. Now we have the relative path to that file that's in cloud storage. Oh yeah, it's not here. We need to go open the instructions JSON on our local file system and change it to the appropriate path. And there's the new value. Okay, run it. And now let's go open the PDF. And there you go, the completed PDF with the form fields completed. Now let's consider the Java example. Now for the Java example, we're going to look at it in depth, and we're actually going to program the class from scratch. The other client libraries, we're going to look at much more briefly. The GitHub project is named Java Client Examples. And you can download this project from GitHub. Of course, it's reliant on the Java client library. You can get the client library from Maven. Make sure you use the right version, because if we go here, the latest version is actually 1.1.0 and not 1.0. We also use the Apache Commons library for writing files. Okay, I like to use Eclipse, so let's go ahead and start Eclipse, launch. And the first thing that came up is the POM. Okay, notice, oh yeah, we already changed it to 1.1.0. Okay, let's go ahead and build the POM. So Maven build, it's going to go ahead and download the resources that's needed and then compile it. Okay, there's the class we're actually going to use, but let's go ahead and delete it because we're going to do this from scratch. Okay, let's go ahead and create a new class named completing AcroForm. New class completing AcroForm. We need a main method. And let's delete the main method. Let's add a new run method, public static void run, and then the string to the API key and the string to the base path. Okay, before we forget, let's go ahead and add the method call up here. So since it's static, it's completing AcroForm.run. And we'll get the API key in just a minute, but we know that our base path is C temp DynamicPDF API samples / fill AcroForm /. Okay, we need to get the API key, copy, okay. Now let's paste the API key. And now we need to add the actual work that we're going to do. First, we want to create a PDF instance. So PDF equals new PDF. Let's import it. And then pdf.setAPIKey. PDF.add PDF, because we're going to add now we're going to add the resource from cloud storage. So let's go ahead and go back to cloud storage, manage resources, and right click, copy file path. And let's paste it. Okay, now we want to add the form fields. So form field equals new form field. And we're going to add the field name and field value. Okay, let's go look at the field name. I forgot what that was. So we're going to go to our documentation, and there it is. Let's copy and paste the top one, topmost subform page 1. So let's copy and paste that. Now, in the interest of time, and then we want to name it, we want to give a value Any Company Inc. as the name. Oh, we want to import it. Now, in the interest of time, let's go ahead and just copy and paste the remaining form fields. Now we need to add each form field to the form fields collection, which is a property of the PDF class. So PDF.getFormFields.addFormField And now we're going to add the first one. And let's add, let's see, what do we got to do next? Oh, we want to copy it. Oh, let's go ahead and add the second one. So PDF get form fields, add, and form field 1. Okay, so now in the interest of time, let's copy and paste the remainder ones, delete that one. Okay, so now we've gotten our form fields and added them to the form field collection. Now PDF response equals, PDF.process. So the PDF response is actually going to call the process method and import it. Now, if it's successful, then we're going to print it out, or if it's successful, we're going to save it. If it's not successful, then we're going to go ahead and print out the error JSON string. So if and else, and system.out.println PDF response dot get error JSON. And for the actual PDF, we're going to do file utils, because we're using the file utils from Common.io, write bytes, because the PDF endpoint returns a byte array containing the PDF. So new file path, or we get the file path and the file name. So let's call it fill AcroForm output.pdf. Okay, now let's put in the actual response bytes. So PD response dot get contents. Let's see, what else did we do? Oh, we need to create a try-catch block. And okay, so now let's check, see if we got everything that we need. We create a PDF. We set the API key. And then we add the PDF from the cloud resource. And let's see, then we create our form field elements. We add them to the form fields collection, and then we process. Let's go ahead and run it. Now let's go look at the PDF or the document, open it. And there you go. There's the completed PDF. Now let's look at the .NET C# example. The .NET project from GitHub. And the project is named .NET Client Examples. And of course, you need to install the DynamicPDF API client library, which you can get from NuGet. And we'll show you how to do that in just a second. Let's open Visual Studio. I assume you already have the solution, so let's open it. Wait for the solution to load. Go up to the completing AcroForm project. Double click on Program to open it. Now let's look at the NuGet package. So go to Manage NuGet Packages. And go to Installed. And you can see we've already installed DynamicPDF.API. So let's go ahead and close it. Everything's fine. Of course, if you're doing this from scratch, you'd have to add it. Now for convenience, we added the API key and the path. And there you go. You can see we create a new PDF instance. We set the API key. We add the PDF from the cloud. We add the form fields. Then we add each form field to the form fields collection of the PDF. Then we call PDF process. If it's successful, then we write it to a file. Otherwise, we write the error JSON or the error JSON. Okay, so let's go ahead and run it. Wait for it to run. Now let's go to the folder that we outputted the document to. And there it is. Let's double click and open it. And there's the completed PDF. Now let's look at the Node.js example. The Node.js examples are in the Node.js client examples project you can get on GitHub. Of course, it's reliant on the client library for Node.js, and you can install this using the Node package manager. I like to use Visual Studio Code, so let's go ahead and open it. And I've already got the project loaded. So let's open completing AcroForm.js. And there you go. So we have our run method. We create a new PDF instance. We set the API key. We add the PDF from the cloud for the form that we're going to fill out. We then create the form fields that we need with the values. And then we add them to the PDF's form fields array. And then we process it. If it's successful, we write it to a file. Otherwise, we log the error. So now let's go ahead and run it. Node completing AcroForm.js. And it processed. So let's go ahead and open the PDF and let's look at the results. And there you go. It was filled out and it has all the values completed in it. Now let's open the PHP example. You can get the PHP project from PHP client examples on GitHub. It uses Composer, so that's how it would get the client library. So open Visual Studio Code, and I preloaded the project with the PHP project. Let's open completing AcroForm.php. There you go. We create a new PDF instance. We set the API key. We add the PDF from the cloud. Then we set the form fields. Then we add each one of the form fields to the PDF instance's form fields collection. Then we call process. If it's successful, we print it to a file. Otherwise, we print out the error JSON string. Oh, let's open the folder and delete the PDF from the Node.js project before we continue, just so we can show we're not cheating. Okay, now let's run the example. PHP completing AcroForm.php, hit return and run it. Let's go ahead and open it, and there you go. The PDF is filled out. Okay, so let's see what we've done here. First, we created a new PDF instance. Then we assigned the API key. We added the PDF from cloud storage. Then we created the form field instances and assigned them the name and value in the constructor. Then we added the form field instances to the PDF instance's form fields collection. Then we called the PDF instance's process method and got the response as a PDF response. Then we either printed the error JSON to the console or we wrote the response, the PDF's binary data that is, to a file. Here's the instructions document. Let's look at how it correlates to the client library object model. First, we have a PDF class. That corresponds to the entire output from the instructions. The PDF input is the PDF, the input of type PDF, which is the AcroForm that we're going to fill out. A PDF consists of a form fields collection. The form fields collection contains one or more form field instances. The form field contains the name value pair of the form in the field that we want to complete. So as we demonstrated in this tutorial, completing a PDF form is straightforward when you use the DynamicPDF Cloud API's PDF endpoint. I'm James, Developer Evangelist at DynamicPDF, reminding you, when you think PDF, think DynamicPDF Cloud API. See you next time.